Hey, good evening, everyone. Rolling up on 7 o'clock, time for PBR Monday Hot Stove League number 2 for 2021. Got a guest tonight. We'll get to him in a few minutes, but first, just a few updates. Uh, any questions that you have right now about the 2022 tour can be best addressed by listening to last week's PBR Monday Hot Stove League number 1 for 2021. I spent more than an hour talking about what I anticipate we're going to do this year, and that's the best information you're going to get for right now, coming straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So I laid out how we're going to run the whole thing, and that's all anybody's going to know right now. We won't have it fully fleshed out until sometime after the first of the year. Uh, Hello, David. Congratulations this weekend. It looked like muddy hell, but you guys looked like you were having fun. Uh, so that's it. You can start your planning right now. I let everybody in on what the intervals are. There's one place where you don't know where you're going to be spending the night, but we'll fix that up for you. That won't be a problem. So, you can basically start your planning right now. And I'm tickled to death that I think I checked this morning. I don't have everyone in the calendar yet because I had actually kind of a busy day today, and I'm going to have another one tomorrow. But I think we already have 5 teams, maybe 6, that are signed up for 2022 already. It's good to get signed up ASAP because I'm going to limit it to 30 teams this year. And over 30 teams, somebody's going to have to drop out before I let you in. So as soon as you want to nail down your dates, go ahead and all the information that's requested over there in the forum and the place that I have set up for you to sign up. Uh, Make sure that you do it ASAP. Kevin Hogan, man, we have royalty here tonight. A super good dude. Kevin is a good guy, and I'm glad you're out there tonight, brother. Um, the other thing I told everybody last week is we're going to limit everybody. I think it's going to be one team per day next year. In extenuating circumstances, I might consider 2, but we're going to limit it to 30 teams, and there's way more than 30 days in the tour. There's close to 60, in fact. Hello, Jim. And so, in the past couple of years, we've had days where we had 4 teams starting out, and that's too much of a headache. It runs into a situation that I completely understand where you're out there and someone's struggling and you come up on them. I mean, human nature, most of you are good people. Human nature is, I'm going to stop and help this person out, but you're really not supposed to do that. uh, and it has happened. So I think this year we're going to limit it to you reserve your day to start, and that's it. And in extenuating circumstances, I may consider letting more than a team start in a day, but under no circumstances is it going to be more than 2. So as soon as you have your date set, you want to go to that place we provided in the forum. Make sure you provide all of the information. And again, it sounds like I'm being a hard ass. Well, you can't sign up until you have this, this, and this. The reason that I do that is because if you don't provide that now, what happens later is, it's the evening of, I have more things to do than just check up on this stuff. So what happened several times last year? Hello, Jeff. Looks like you had fun this weekend too. And hello, Caleb. Is there be teams the night before, and I would say, look, I just checked your PLB link, and it doesn't work, and I would invariably get back some smart alecky response. Well, I reposted over here in this thread here that it's working. I don't have time to check out 8 pages of a thread to figure out where the hell you put your working PLB link. So I want you to have it when it's ready to go, have all the information there, your dates, everything set up. And as I've told you many times before, you get to create that PLB URL. You could name it whatever the hell you want. So go out and check and see if the one that you want is taken already. And all you have to do is type it in and see if it's taken. And if it's not, just make sure it's something kind of unique and put that in as your placeholder. And then if you have to change it later, go ahead and change it, but just change it in your original post. Don't repost 6 pages later. Here's my updated PLB link. Because again, that means that every time I want to sit down and try to figure that stuff out, I got to go through all these posts and see where it is. That's why I ask for it all at the same time. It just makes it easier. I understand that some of you, the cost is a hardship, so you don't want to activate a subscription till you have to. I get that, but just come up with a placeholder that looks like it hasn't already been taken. And if you make it unique enough, nobody's going to take it. I mean, it's a popular service, but it's not that well subscribed, and you can get away with it. So remember, first come, first serve. There is one returning team that's already coming back, and I told them they're in first place at the end of the queue. So again, starting next year, 2022, new teams get preference. The team that is returning rode a little less than half of the route last year, and I already told them, look, I'm going to make you guys ride a little bit more for a team your size than a team that hasn't ever been anywhere on the route before. And I think that's fair, and they thought it was fair. They get it, so it's going to be just fine. So anyway, that's it. So if you have any questions, before you start peppering me with PMs and stuff like that, just go look at that PBR Monday last week, the first hot stove league for this fall. And I think that will answer all of your questions for 2022. As I've told everybody, it's stunning what we've got coming next year. It's what I always wanted this thing to be. And it's finally in the form starting next year where, we can run that way for 2 or 3 years. Then I feel perfectly good about walking away from this whole business and getting on with my life, which is what I intend to do. But the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a hell of a tour of Idaho. It's exactly what I always wanted it to be. We figured out a way to add in some things and put them together in ways that make sense. The transfer sections are fine, and I think the venture factor next year is going to go through the roof because there's going to be days where you don't even know where you're going until that morning. You're going to get up and there'll be an email that says, go this way. Somebody asked this week, well, everybody will be going the same way, right? Nope. There's no guarantee of that. I have enough trail next year that I can send you down any way I want. So there's no guarantee that not only are there 1-person, 2-person, and 3-person variations and different bonus loops and challenge sections and things like that, but I have enough trail that you may not take the exact same route that the last 2-person team or whatever your number of team members is did. That adds adventure to it. So some people have already expressed some consternation about this, and I get that. There's one team that signed up that's from my old stomping grounds. I think one of the guys from Kentucky, the other guy's from Southern Ohio, and I came from Central Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky. And those guys, I already like it. By the way, people from Kentucky and Ohio have outstanding success rates on the Tour of Idaho. Those teams always come out here, and those guys are great riders. I am not one of those kind of people that believes that since you ride back east, you can't ride. That's simply not true. I know too many people that can dispel that myth. It's the same way, by the way, in climbing and skiing. When I first came out here, everybody assumed that because I had skied ski areas of the east, I remember showing up for ski school and actually made me try out, even though I had I was a PSI member and I'd certified at a certain level. You're supposed to be able to walk in at the level I'd certified. They said, nah, since you're from the Midwest, we got to check you out. So I actually had to go to ski instructor school again. I'd won instructor of the year at the place I used to work, and I had to go through are you good enough to be a ski instructor? and it didn't take too long to prove that I was. And what none of those guys understood is back in the Midwest and the East, look at the composition of the Olympic team and how many people come from ski areas back east. That's because you're skiing on snow that has the consistency of 80,000 PSI cement, which is basically what most race courses are like. So you can ski back east, you can ride a motorcycle back east, you can climbing, oh God, don't get me going on that. I go to Yosemite for a month and everybody go, where are you from? And I'd say Red River Gorge. And they go, oh yeah, well, this ain't Red River Gorge. Yeah, I know, smart ass. It'll be just fine. So I believe in you guys from the East and the Midwest. I know that most of you know how to ride. You make the most of what you got. I like riding out here better, but it doesn't mean that I think that the good riders all ride out here and the poor riders ride back there. But these guys, to make a long story short, because I want to get to our guest here in a minute, they put in their little blurb their little self description that, yeah, we're a little nervous about this whole, not knowing where you're going thing. We admit that we're the kind of guys who are weaned on following a red line on a GPS and all that. Well, good for you. So is everybody else. And this is going to knock you right out of that. And I guarantee you, you are going to have a blast. Please do not worry about the fact that I'm not going to tell you where you're going until you need to know. It'll make it a lot more fun. Those of us, several of us went out and experimented with this. We tried it. Now, I've done it for years, and it's a blast. Yeah, you're going to get lost some, but we took that into account. Every time I make the navigation more difficult, I scale back on the riding some. So there's some short days this year, a couple of half days. We compensated for all that. There are a couple of kick-ass days too. Some days where you're really going to have to put the pedal to the metal. But on those days, for the most part, we're going to give you the route in advance. If you really got to make some time, we'll help you out with that. So I think that I'm envious of you all next year. Those of you who follow me on social media know that one thing I consistently say every time I've done a good rides, my greatest regrets, I will never get to do this trail for the first time again. Because the first time's always the best. It was the same way in climbing, same way in skiing steep stuff. The first time you go down something, it scares the hell out of you, but that's always the funnest time. It's the same thing in climbing, because the first time you climb a route, you don't know what's up there when you reach your hand up. And the second time you do it, you do. So this year, I think the element of adventure is a lot higher. So I would not consider the fact that we're going to make the navigation more difficult. I wouldn't take that as a bad thing. If I were you, I would be looking at that as, oh boy, this is going to be a lot more fun. And always remember, the reason that you should be coming out here is because you want to have fun. And I know I meet everybody that comes, and I know that some of you don't view it that way. This is a strictly business. This is another bucket list thing for you. And if you don't make it, it's a horrible thing. And nothing that I say is going to dissuade anyone who embraces that point of view from continuing to hang on to it. I've spent years trying, and it hasn't done any good. But I will tell you this, I've never had that point of view. Whenever I go into any big adventure, I figure there's a chance that I might fail. And sometimes that chance is much greater than others. And it's never a factor, unless the consequence of failure is death. It's never a factor in my decision about whether or not I want to take this on or not. I just want to have some fun. And some of the most fun climbs I ever did, some of the most memorable routes I ever did would be classically considered failures because I didn't make it to the top. But I still had a good time. My friends had a good time. Everybody got back in one piece, and the Kodachrome 64 slides still look kick-ass. That's what you guys get into next year. All right, so without any further ado, I want to bring in our guest tonight. There we go. Let me unmute him. Team Beta Alpha Delta, Sean Smith. How you doing, bud?
Doing really good, Martin. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for everything you do to make this thing happen for us.
Well, you're welcome. Again, the pleasure is all mine. Well, I can't universally say that, but the pleasure is mostly mine. And again, the great thing about this is being able to meet the people along the way. I unfortunately did not get to spend as much time with you as I would like, and I also have to apologize again because you were one of those guys that were sort of towards the end of the caravan there. And, we didn't get to give you all the love and attention that we get to give everybody else, which is why why we're here tonight. So you've seen these things before. You know how it works. You and I have talked a little bit before, so I know a little bit about your background, but nobody else does. So tell us about you. Tell us how you found out about this, your preparation, go through the whole thing. Then we'll kind of go through the highlights and lowlights.
Sure. Yeah, so my background is actually a little bit like Martin's. I come from the climbing world. I'm originally from Australia. I came over here 25 years ago. I met my now wife in Yosemite. I was a climbing bum, lived in the park for all summer long for about three summers in a row. I was missing the Australian summers and ended up staying here and then drifted into mountain biking and racing downhills and then moto as I got older. So I've only been moto riding for about 6 years. And just like Team Eagles, my biggest fear coming into this was the nav, the mystery route. I was so used to following my phone that just the uncertainty of what was ahead, that was the biggest fear for me as well. It's like, will I be able to figure it out? And it works. And like I told Martin earlier when we met, is the waypoint system. I was originally like, what the hell is this crap? Like, what is it? That makes no sense at all. I've got an MVUM. The MVUMs are worthless. We all know that, but they help you with, I want to go that way. And if I'm not going that way, I can do it. But the waypoints were like, well, what's that all about? But once you rode with it, and I rode it heavily in a desert prep. I did a couple of multi-days just using a waypoint system. And then Pocatello day one, pre-ride and around Memorial Day, I found it easier. It was easier than what I was used to. It was awesome being able to come up to a junction section and knowing the MVUMs were questionable. It's like instead now I've got a waypoint that way, head to it, and it lets you flow along a lot faster. So that was one big part of my prep, was learning that system because it was very different.
Yeah, it's again, thank you, but you cannot. That's another thing you can't get people to let go of, because we have weaned an entire generation of outdoors people on the fact that the GPS is the end all and be all. And what that results in are people who just stare at that screen. They stare at the GPS. And I ride with guys that are completely unaware that we just rode past one of the most beautiful vistas that good dreams are capable of conjuring, because they weren't looking off to their left side. They were looking down at their handlebars where their GPS unit is mounted the whole time. And the other bad thing about that is if you use, as you pointed out, the MVUMs or most other resources, like, the CalTopo information is frequently wrong. The state of Idaho ArcGIS system is frequently wrong. It's wrong all the time. So if you're just snapping in those lines, you're going to make mistakes anyway, because the trail's not going to be where all that stuff said it was. It's better just to put the waypoints in places that are real. Then everybody quits looking at their screen. They just ride the trail until they think they need to look at another waypoint.
That's one of the things I loved about day 9 is we just had trail numbers, and it almost made it simpler, because sitting at your computer in January, when you're sitting here angsting over everything, you worry about what the satellite imagery shows you. Instead of just, there's a waypoint, trust the ground. Once you get there, you'll be able to see what's happening once you're on the ground. And then day 9, just following those trail things. We're going to go up here. We're going to take that one. We're going to go for a while. That was even better. Like the mystery system you've got coming next year, I want to ride again just to do more of that. That was awesome, that day 9 stuff.
Well, there's going to be a bunch of it. I think next year, everybody's going to get to experience what all of you experienced this year to a certain degree. And what I used to experience every year I did it, because I used to go out before everybody, and I wouldn't publish the route till after I got back. And that's what made it fun for me. And, in the early days, I didn't even have a GPS unit. I just had maps and trail numbers and stuff like that. And I had a little book, a little route book that I keep in my coat pocket. And I just pull it out every once in a while for a reality check. And I actually drew little topos like they do in Meyer's book about Yosemite, little route topos.
Mm-hmm.
I did those for the tour of Idaho, drive or ride 3 miles, turn northwest. So you're from Australia. What do you do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?
I work in computer software, so software development. So I just work remote, which that's why I get to ride so much, is I live in a truck camper through the summer. My wife's a teacher, so Memorial Day we come to Idaho. We've been coming to Idaho the past 5 years now, and just live in our truck camper. We've been mostly living around Stanley. This year got me going much further afield than what I'm a creature of habit. So I know Stanley area incredibly well. But the tour sent me to North Fork, up to south of Superior, into all that stuff. It was that was most of my prep coming into this. Generally, we get up there Memorial Day and we start cutting out the trails around Stanley with a friend of mine, and my wife, she comes out and cuts as well. And then just depending on what my focus is that year, I'll cut those areas, just because I know how much hard work it takes and how much better it is to ride it if it's already cut. So I cut out day 5. Some at day 6 with Chad and Sean, and I know Dave Green was up there cutting as well. So that was most of my prep after the gear prep and the ride with the loaded bike prep that you should be doing in the spring. It was just riding and cutting big days. I put about 400 hours of single track hours on my bike a year.
Now, you made an interesting choice this year, and you and I had talked about it. And I've also seen where in the forum you've talked about this choice. And your thought process was fascinating to me because initially I disagreed with your choice, but you're another one of these people that had thought it through so thoroughly that after you explained it to me, and then especially watching you to explain it to other people, I changed my mind and I agreed with you. And that choice was to carry, I think you have a 193 top handle saw, right?
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, just
Same
the
one
one
as I
that.
have.
Yeah, it's actually I went to the 194 brand new for this year just so I had a new saw. My 193 was 6 years old, getting pretty clubbed out. So it's just the new version of the 193, identical saw, 16-inch bar, carbide chain on it. And yeah, like I mentioned to you, like I went so late deliberately because I wanted to go as late as possible to try to avoid the heat and to let as much cutting happen because we all know those who ride Idaho know what cutting means. And going early, like Jim Spooner is an absolute monster to have gone that early successfully because trails are just not ready. They're just not clear that early. So I went as late as possible, trying not to get like Jeff did into the storm systems, but as late as I could. I probably could have got through without the saw. There was at least a few that would have been really annoying as a solo person. And as a soloist, I think the saw, that's why I did it, because you don't have the extra hands. You can't take a break silky. You can't drag a bike over. You got to deal with it. And I was able to come up to any sort of obstacle, and instead of having to think about, am I going around it? Am I hauling my bike over it? If it wasn't an easy hop, I'd just get off and take a break because cutting the saw was going to let me have a break. I could just cut the saw, almost get a bit of a rest as a soloist, and then continue on.
I think there is one difference between the 194 and the 193 that might be important. Doesn't the 194 have the new electronic quick start system in it?
It felt, I don't know, I don't remember. It may, but it started on exactly the same, put it up into the thing, pump it a couple of times, start it, put it back as the 193 did. So it started the same way.
One thing, most of you out there know more about saws than I do, so I'm preaching to the choir here. But one thing you have to be a little bit careful with steel saws is that a few years ago they adopted a new electronic quick start system, and everybody that has dealt with that system curses those saws because when it works, it's great, but it frequently doesn't work. And friends of mine who saw professionally go out of their way to avoid that. So whenever you're buying a steel saw, that's a consideration. Now, that story's anecdotal.
Yeah.
It's a single data
My
point.
bigger saw, my 261 has that, and I didn't
Hmm.
realize what that thing would do when it went to like that, and it's a
Hmm.
pain in the ass when it starts playing up.
Yeah.
But I've never had that on the 193 or the 194 this past summer.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know what the 194 weighs, but my 193, which is set up the same way as yours, it's got the lightning kit on it, which means it's got the special bar, the carbide chain. And by the way, you have to have that special bar to run the carbide chain that steel sells. I mean, it'll fit on a stock bar, but you'll ruin it if you do that. Mine weighs, I think, full of fluids. And Sean, I'm sure that you've weighed yours, but I think mine weighs about 9.2 pounds full of fluids.
I want to say mine's right there as well. Like the new one was right on that. And then because you've got the saw, you've got extra stuff in your system now in your packing system. Like I had a little bit of two-stroke oil. I had a little Nalgene, a bar and chain. You got a spare chain with you just in case. So that's all extra as well if you do bring the saw. And then there's the impact on the lighting. And that was my biggest dilemma on this, is I knew I wanted to ride with the saw, but I also knew I was facing an hour and a half, 2 hours of dark every morning. So you got to figure your lighting out if you go with the saw.
Well, you certainly changed my thinking on that because I have ridden with a saw before and I hated it. But when I bought the 193 a few years ago, it occurred to me, this isn't like my old Dolmars and stuff like that, which were roughly the same size of power, but weighed almost twice as much. I mean, this thing really is light. And I usually run around with mine in a saw pack. I've got a Dakine saw pack, which is kind of cool. The only problem is when you want to grab it, you've got to grab it actually by the bar to
Right.
pull it out, unless you want to get off the bike and take the pack off. And I wouldn't do that for the Tour of Idaho because it would interfere with the way you're packing everything else. But if I can come up with a better saw mount, I don't think that saw will ever come off my bike because riding in the fall, I rode really late this year. I didn't get to start riding until around September 1st. Then I rode at least every other day for about 5 weeks. And even at the end of September and the beginning of October, a lot of stuff I was riding needed sawing. And
Yep.
there were times when it was big logs, I would have had to turn around if I hadn't had my saw with me, because you're just not going to silky saw your way through too many 30-inch trees.
Yep. No, and I ride with my saw. It goes on the beginning of May here in Colorado, and then it stays on until my desert season kicks off. So it came off this year right around, I think it was the beginning of October, and it's on my bike the rest of the summer. And so it's, you just, and that's part of it for everybody who hasn't ridden the saw, who does next year, because of the way you're saying they should, and it's a great thing. They also better pre-ride with your saw. Get used to that setup. Just it affects handling a little bit. It's not terrible, but it definitely affects things. It's definitely a bit more weight. So the saw carrier and the teams, get used to it.
Yeah, the other thing too is that you really, really, really should consider taking a class. There are classes offered everywhere about sawing trails. Now, you can ignore all the bullshit about sawing the 8x10 box and stuff like that. Just saw what you want to saw.
Yeah.
But a chainsaw is not a toy, and you can really hurt yourself with a chainsaw. And I see a lot of guys out on motorcycles whipping saws around the woods, doing things that sooner or later you're going to lop something off. And if you're by yourself and you have an accident with a saw, you may have killed yourself. I mean, you might bleed out if it's a very serious accident before you get out of there. So, by all means, we're going to encourage everyone to carry a chainsaw next year. Part of that, along with first aid and all the other things that we suggest you do, you really should make sure you understand how to use the saw. But enough of that. So, take us through your tour day by day. Uh,
Yep.
Continue with preparation if you need to. Then let's just go through it day by day. Give me your thoughts, high points, low points, things that surprised you in both good and bad ways.
Yeah, the only other piece of preparation that I sort of had to settle on is the logistics of the end of the ride, assuming you were successful. So I decided to park my truck in Hamilton, Montana, because going into this, I've done multi-day moto stuff before, and mentally, I would get weak around day 4. And I knew that coming out in the tour, day 4 was also one of the most technical days. You know, I've ridden all of those Stanley days because I've lived there, but it was a big technical day. And I wanted to make sure that if I was getting mentally weak at that, I had a carrot for myself. So I put my truck at the end of day 6 as my carrot. Like, just get to day 6, you got a truck there. If you're going to bail, then your truck's there waiting. And then also figuring that once I get to day 6, you've now got the big long transfer and you should be able to continue it. So I rode my dirt bike down from Hamilton down to Pocatello in soaking rain the whole day. It was the rainy time, so I rode all that way down there. It was freezing cold, super cold. Got into Pocatello, and yeah, the Marshall Bird it kicked off solo that day, abandoned in the mud, and it was just looking really sketchy and miserable. And Team Mum was out there. Your mum was out there as well, and you could see in their pictures. So I actually thought strongly about deferring and starting a day later just because of that mud, because of that rain. And Martin and I talked about it. And at one point I did. And I actually got a new hotel and decided I was going to go. And then it started clearing up. Martin sent me the little prod saying, you might want to consider going. So I went on schedule, stayed on schedule, just started late. It was definitely slimy the first half of the day, but it cleared up nicely. By the time I got to Robbers Roost, it was almost hero dirt. One thing that was one of the most surprising things to me, because I pre-rode, which is, I just rode the single track sections. I didn't do it as a single push. I had no real inclination to do that. I wanted to do that for the first time on the tour, but that double track after Robbers Roost, it's legit. And I just pictured Martin sitting at home with all these guys, just swearing at him about the double track. Oh, double track's easy, right? That double track is legit, and it was fun. Like that last part as you're coming towards your place before that last bit of single track. Can't remember the name of it. That stuff was legit. It was that day beats you. You better be ready for that day. It's great to have a filter feature like that. Then day 2 was awesome, rest day. The guys down at the Pocatello Power Sports hooked me up and let me into the shop on a Saturday, even though they didn't have the mechanics, do my oil change, put rubber on. I had pretty toasted, not destroyed rubber. I had new rubber, but it had been through a weekend clearing before that, and then riding it down on the blacktop down to start the tour. So new rubber to start day 2. Day 2 was great. It was slimy again in the morning, but by the time you got to the desert, I had 65-degree deserts, which felt like cheating compared to the guys earlier in the season. And the mystery route is, I think it was one of the high points of the route of the tour for sure. It was just really fun figuring that out.
And you did a great job of it too. For those of you who don't know, Sean's one of the few people that pretty much nailed his mystery route. I mean, he did a really good job. Uh, I was watching him because we allowed everybody to leave their PLBs on this year, and I think you might have been one of those knuckleheads too that had it on at 2 minute resolution, so I could really see what you were doing.
Yeah.
But you did a great job in the mystery route. So describe for everybody. You liked it. You thought it was good, and you did a great job. So tell everybody what that's like when you roll up to that first sign there at the last waypoint. You're looking way the hell out across the desert. You know you got to cross that, and all you've got are like a set of distances and compass
And you've
roses
got
and
the
compass
stories for
bearings.
everybody listening into these. You've got all the stories of Southern Butte being this thing that never gets closer, and you can see it way over there because it was a good clear day, and you just now you're really literally embarking into the unknown. Um, but it was, just it's a lot like climbing. It's a lot like an aid wall. Don't get overwhelmed by the whole thing. Just do it one step at a time. Solve the puzzle one piece at a time. Next piece, next piece. So that's how I tackled it. Is just, what's the first thing, what's the second thing, and the directions you gave us enough sort of like check-in spots with the lat longs or along the way, so you could make sure you were going well, and if you needed to adjust it all. And I blew by one of the turns. It was only by like 50 or so feet, but I blew by it just because I just wasn't paying close enough attention, and that was the good lesson. It was very early too, and after that you sort of knew to pay attention and look for those faint lines across the desert, because this is not traveled terrain you're on. But it was awesome out there. That's a great place. I think if I lived in Pocatello, that would be where I'd be from September. Well, not you got such a good fall season, but I'd be in there a lot anyway, particularly in the spring. That's awesome terrain out there.
Yeah, if you went out there right now, you would be up to your handlebars in mud.
Okay.
When a little bit of water gets on that's what everybody thinks. Man, I want to come back here. When you can't ride in the mountains, I'll go out there. That desert is really high, and so you're riding uphill every from when you get out of American Falls all the way to Big Southern Butte. So the base of the butte is at like 5,500 feet, I think. So that desert gets a lot of snow that the valleys don't get. It soaks into the ground. It keeps the ground damp all winter long, but it doesn't freeze out there a lot. It's just kind of weird because there's sort of a permanent high pressure system that sits over that. Clear skies, the sun hits it. So about November and December, you go out there and you'll be riding along. If you stop, it's like quicksand. Your bike will
Yeah.
sink right up to the
That was my
pegs.
biggest fear with the rain, is the effect on that dirt, because like the western Colorado, eastern Utah desert is just the same. If it's wet, it's just, your bike will turn to cement. You can literally not move through it at times. So I was afraid of that, but it worked out well. There was enough moisture out there to make the dirt good, and I got really lucky with I think the conditions, probably some of the best conditions for all the tour attendees. I definitely I feel like that was good karma for cutting from earlier in the
Yeah, I
summer.
think that I think you're uh, not giving yourself proper credit there because you actually had some suck conditions. It may have gotten better later in the day, both those first 2 days, but riding up all that steep stuff at the beginning of day one when it's wet, that's no fun at all. It's hard enough when it's dry. When it's wet, it's kind of nasty. In the desert, I mean, you didn't know. You might have, by the time you got out there, it might have been okay.
Yeah,
But you had no reason to anticipate that when you started out that
right.
morning. Because I remember thinking when you rolled out of town, I don't know how this is going to work for this guy today. He
Yeah,
may
yeah.
not have the greatest day in the world.
No, I played it well, and then day three was just great. Like I'd never ridden any. I actually had ridden none of the day three trails, which surprised me because I've ridden a lot around that area, but I just had never happened on those particular trails. And even the double track stuff, it was just spectacular out there. And then rolling into Kaylin's place, I know her well. I know that place. I've been through there a lot on just normal rides. So getting to stay there, chat with Margaret, stay the night on literally, I think, the most comfortable bed I've ever slept on. Like that bed that I was in was amazing. Like it was that's a great place. I'm glad you left it in there, left it as a key stopping point. It's a great little community she's built there, that's for sure. Then day four, I think if you've ridden a lot of Idaho, you've probably seen a lot of the day four stuff. Paradise, Snowslide, um, not what Germania and Grand Prize, those areas. They're just common trail riding areas. So probably a few people have seen that, but it adds up to a big day. And I knew that. So that was one of the days for me. Day 4, 6, and 8 were actually my mental cruxes going into it because I knew they had so much in them and was so involved. Day 4 ended up going really well. It was actually the day I had my one of two savage offs on the trail. I was just riding along, not paying attention, heading towards Callan's place on some easy single track just past the water crossing, and got jousted by something. I don't know what, but my bike ended up upside down off the trail and had to get that back up. And that's the challenge of the soloist. If your bike comes off, it's very involved to get back going. And that was one of my two screw ups I had on the tour in terms of bikes upside down. And then day 4 was great. Just you really got to just keep a good pace on that one. And for me, make sure I didn't spend too much time at Sawmill because again, I'm so local to that area. I know Ross, the owner of it, really well. There's a buddy of mine sitting there when I rolled up through there. You just got to get in and out of that place. It's a time sink because it's got great food, great burgers, but you can't stay there because that day is so long. It's so involved. But it went pretty well. And then day 5, I don't remember too much about that being an issue. It was a day I had pre-written cutting early in the year, so I knew most of it up to Hat Lakes, and got through that pretty well. I think the new sections you put in for I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 because of the fire, sort of surprised me at how steep and rough they were. It might have been the morning of 6 or the afternoon of 5. I can't remember. Up to the Wallace Lake Point. That stuff was
That's 6.
That was 6. Okay, so that next morning, that was surprising, and just how steep it was and how loose it was in there. And there was a lot of down timber still in there. 5 and 6 is where I used my saw the most in the tour. Cutting, you have to cut in. Had to cut in 5. Had to cut in 6. There's just so much burn area in both those days that's where you're going to be cutting. The end of 5 went well. Got in there plenty of time for Josh. Great guy, was there waiting, got my tires changed, smile on his face. He's another one of those sort of high points of the tour in terms of people, as well. And then the big day, the crux day for me was day 6 because of all the changes that happened with Powder Gulch and Sheep Creek being out with the fires. And there was so much trail to the west of the 93 that nobody had success on it. There was a lot of down timber in there. Again, props to Jim Spooner for what he did in there. They are legit trails, the stuff he rode and got through that early in the season. But I got into the top as you were dropping into ditch. And going into that, it was the top of ditch was my sort of decision point. If I was feeling good and strong and early enough in the day, I would go for it. I would go down ditch, come up axe and go out divide and then go back up and down twin. And if not, I would take the easier way. It's not easy. But I managed to do all of that, which is great. So I kept my challenge points in my bank, which I definitely needed as I got into 8. On 7, it went well, but 7 and 8 is where my problems began. The end of 8, my tubeless system. I ran a tubeless rear and a bib front, and they both started to struggle on 8. The front bib started to get sacked out. It held up, and it held up just fine, but it was worrying in the back of your mind because Green Machine had their bibs blow up on them in 7, and mine was starting on 8. It survived, but my tubeless did not. It was that was where I tore the first of a side knob, and then as you go into 9 and 10, I basically rode those 2 days in a flat tire. But 8 was great. Ant Hill, the lookout across there is just amazing riding. That is so backcountry in there. And what's the trail that connects up to Ant Hill? The one that you're pretty much in a jungle.
Fish Creek and Fish Butte
Creek.
trails.
Loved Fish Creek. It felt like backcountry. Like you couldn't see the trail in places. It was technical in places. I loved that those 3 trails there were definitely the high point in terms of trails for me. Ant Hill is also where I had to pull my pulley system out for the first time on one of those switchbacks. It just caught me out. It was like powder, and I got stuck to the axle and just had to pull myself out of it. And after that, I was a bit more careful. But day 8 was, I think, one of the best days of the tour for me. Lots of great riding. I knew about Windy Bill and Windy Ridge because I had cut Windy Ridge out the weekend before I started the tour and started at Windy Bill and just gave up like 4 miles in because I ran out of light. And I didn't think that was cut. So I'd made the decision beforehand just to try to come in from the top of Scurvy. Um, and so I figured it was all downhill just in my mind for some reason. I don't know why, but it's not. It's uphill
It
both
is all
directions.
downhill for a long way.
And it's savagely uphill in both directions. Like you go out to Junction Mountain and there's some real legit uphill climbing in there. I actually at one point had a trouble with my bike and had to winch myself. And then going back, you got the Scurvy climb. So it's uphill, legit uphill in both directions. That day was really fun. That was a great day.
Switchback Hill is no joke, man. Riding up Switchback Hill is hard. I think coming back is easier. Riding up Scurvy's got some of that kind of stuff in it too. But I think since I was there last, I've been told that they went in and brushed some of that stuff and took out some of the ruts of the Scurvy Hill. But I think Switchback Hill is still a mess.
Yeah, it had been fully cut and brushed back. That's actually why I did it. I wasn't sure I was going to do it. And I ran into the Forest Service manager, I don't know, manager, but one of the work leaders who was redoing all of those water bars kind of going up to the Scurvy switchback. They were just in the middle of redoing them all, and got chatting with him. And he said, yeah, that the a crew had been in there like 10 days ago and fully cleared out Windy Bill. They cleared almost to Junction, but not all the way. There was still probably close to half a mile to Junction that was fully uncut. But they did a great job, and that definitely made it easier. But the end of it wasn't done, and then it was just, you could see looking down Windy Bill, all the teams who'd come up, that were just, it's crazy how bad the deadfall is on those trails. Like if you go early next year onto those trails, be ready for a workout.
Yeah, that area up there is always that way.
Yeah.
The health of the forest is really bad, and the places that aren't burned over, the beetle kill's so bad that every time the wind blows, boom, it's a mess. It's matchsticks for miles.
Yep. Yep. Superior was actually really good to stay in. I liked that. I'm not sure what it would. I've not done the alternative, but I really liked Superior. Great little hotel. The owners in there were super friendly. She'd actually heard about the tour, which surprised me. Or maybe it was because the people come through earlier, but she knew about the tour. It was a great place to stay. And then it was 8 and 9 is where I started. Like it had been cold for me all the way. I ended up buying a new puffy jacket from North Fork on day 6. It had been so cold in the mornings. But riding out of Superior heading to Wallace was really cold. I have terrible hands, Australian hands, I guess. So I had a hard time with cold fingers, that's for sure. And then that whole day, I had just flat tires. I would tear a knob, I'd plug it. I'd tear another knob, I'd plug it. I went through like 12 or 13, ran out of tire plugs. Eventually, I air it up because those trails that Jim and those guys put in for 9, they are legit as well. There is some steep trail there that's super fun. And riding with a flat tire was less than fun, that's for sure. I did run into some locals coming the other way and they ended up helping me at the end of the day. I was able to buy a tire off one of them from their house and change it. And so I put a brand new fresh tire on, but in all of the fatigue and messing around with it, I screwed up my tubeless install. So the next day I still had flat tires on Independence Creek as on day 10. So that was the harsh lesson to me, was as much as everybody tries to convince you, and it's like the nav, the gear, I don't think there was the only thing, which now I think people are saying is a little bit different, that I disagreed with, and I feel like I was still right, was the chainsaw. Everything else that everybody ever talks about is do this, use UHDs, run nav systems this way. It's all spot on. Like go back and listen and watch that, everybody. It's absolutely all spot on. There is nothing like the tour. Like I've done multi-day rides and I ride a lot, but the tour is it. There is nothing like it in the way that it adds up the difficulties. It's got technical, it's got transfers. It's my shortest days for 12 hours, and on average I was out there moving 14 hours a day, and that's moving time. Like your bike is worked. Pay attention to what everybody says around that side of things.
Yeah, you'll. I'm sure you've heard me make this analogy before. And of course, it'll appeal to you because of your background. But the Tour of Idaho doesn't have very much. It doesn't have any 511 or 512 in it. What it is it's like a 10,000 foot 5.8 jam crack. That's the way I look at it. So it's like going to Yosemite and doing a what's that big one over an Elephant Buttress? There's some notorious 5 pitch off width over there that I did once. But it's like that. There's not a single thing on it that's hard, but it just goes forever at a certain level of difficulty. And people, they can't wrap their minds around that. Everybody that shows up is God's gift to riding motorcycles, and everybody's won some race somewhere, and yada yada yada. It just goes on forever. You try to tell people, look, this tubeless thing that worked really well for you in racing may not work so great here because this is different. The stresses on the bike are different. What you want the bike to do is different than it is in a race. And if the damn thing breaks, good luck being able to fix it way out in the middle of nowhere. If a lot of the stuff that we tell people is to keep it simple. The navigation, as you pointed out, once you learn how to do it our way, it's much simpler than the way most people do it. And it doesn't depend on technology. You can, basically after a while, you can just kind of figure it out on your own. And next year, you may not even need a damn GPS except to record your route. You may be able to get through the whole thing just with, a set of directions.
Yeah, it's that away from everything thing that I don't think you really realize it. Like tubeless, when you're riding every weekend, every day, and you get a flat, you can plug it, you go back to the truck, you deal with it. That's great. But when you're 5, 6 days away from anywhere that can sell you anything that might be close to helping you, I had 2 days to picture if only I had a tube. This would have been so much easier if only I'd had a tube. And I was thinking about that to myself almost 2 days straight. It would have been so simple. Even if I punctured the tube, I just would have, patched it and moved on. You can self-sufficient a tube. You can't self-sufficient a screwed up moose or a screwed up tubeless. And
I have
that I
never,
think is the
ever
thing.
fragged a tube so badly that it could not be
Yep.
reused. You may have to wait a while for the glue and stuff to dry it, and if you got a big enough hole, but you can always patch a tube. And I have never had a flat tire in the Tour of Idaho. Heavy duty tube, stiff sidewall tire, slime, you're good to go. And I know people who run tubeless and moose and stuff like that all the time, and they switch for the Tour. They say, nope, for this, that's the wrong tool for the job. The
Yep.
better tool is something simple that's field serviceable.
Yep.
I think Jeff's that way. Jeff Stoss, the guy's a brilliant GNCC racer, and I think he switched from his normal setup to desert racing tires and ultra heavy duty tubes and slime for the Tour. And it's, as you pointed out, that part of the equation has to be, okay, what if something does go wrong? What if this system does fail? What are my options? And your option is to carry a spare tube. So if you're going to do that anyway, why not just run tubes?
Right. And I had all the tube stuff except the tube because I knew that I'd probably have to deal with changing the tire myself along the way. And I needed to have irons. I needed to have everything. And I did, in the store, I had to use all my own stuff. And then even in Wallace, when I changed it, I had to use my own gear. And like normally when I'm riding on the weekends, I don't have irons with me. I don't have anything on my bib tubeless setup because I can always get home. But you can't do that on the Tour. And particularly that late in the Tour, which is where those failures happen. That's where I had it happen to me. That's where Green Machine had it happen to me. You're so far into it that even if it took you 2 hours to change a tube because you're just terrible at it, you'd still finish the Tour, and you'd be able to finish it out. You would be able to finish it, and that's what really just rode on me for those 2 days. It's like, you dumbass. Like if you'd had a tube here, there'd be no fear of not finishing it after all that hard work and all that prep. And now you're facing the real potential that you're just not going to be able to finish this.
And that would have especially sucked for you because when you PM me what was going on, I mean, you're close to the end of day 9. And if you got knackered on day 9, that would be like the most awful thing in the world. Happened to Jensen last year. Wasn't at the end of day 9, but it was at the beginning of day 9 when he got caught in a storm that he couldn't get around and got himself soaked, and then the temperature dropped below freezing. So it doesn't happen that often. Normally when people make it that far in, they make it. But yeah, I was a little worried myself when you described what the problem was. I haven't ridden most of those trails yet. I've ridden some of them, but certainly not all of them that you rode. But what I know about that area is those trails are steep as hell, and the ability to have the right amount of air pressure in your tire is pretty crucial to success.
Yeah, they're steep and loose, and there's water bars in there. You got to lift up and over. It's a great ride if you're on a vacation weekend. On day 9, it felt really good to be done with it, I gotta say.
Well, this year those guys got more. They've got like that loop that you did. They've got a bunch of bonus loops that they're going to put on there. They got a challenge section that's supposed to be the nastiest thing that bad dreams are capable of conjuring. And since everybody knows this year you're going to be starting from Superior, and we'll ride you up to Missoula Lake, you should be there by 7:30 in the morning. So the nice thing about going to Superior, the old place was nothing special. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's an iconic Idaho place, but it's out of the way and it's difficult to book a room there. So even though Superior is not in Idaho, it makes the route better. So I think that going Superior, as you mentioned, I think is actually the better move. It's a nicer town. You can get better food there. Well, you have better access to food, I would say. If you go to Loksha Lodge, which is where we used to go, and the dining room is closed, you are actually knackered. Yeah, Kevin Hovey, you know all about Superior. Do they have transmission parts for KTM and Superior, Kevin? I reckon not. All right, so you get up there and you made it. You got to see Donna. And all of a sudden you're rolling on day 10. All you got to do is not fall off your bike. Describe your last day
Well,
and
other
your
than I
arrival at
had to
Sundance.
also, I rode out with a flat tire, got all the way up to the pass, and went back to Wallace to try to find tubeless goop. I was still in tire problem mode at that point. Got it going, went through Independence Creek and dropped into Gold Creek and was able to get my tire fixed finally. So then leaving Gold Creek Lodge, I was really in that final mode of just roads and double track up to Hoodoo. There is some redneckery terrain up there, I gotta say. Like you said, there are areas up there that you don't want to make some wrong turns, that's for sure. And coming up on Sunset, the one thing that was my biggest fear now is I'd ridden the ride. I felt like I had my nav pretty good. I had a couple of challenge points in my bank. I got the tire sorted out, and I was just praying my bike wouldn't blow up. It was like 100 hours on the oil change. It's like just I'm gonna walk up Sunset Mountain if I have to. That was my biggest fear rolling up to Sunset. And once you get there, it was awesome. And John, the attendant, he was a great guy. The guy who writes books and stuff. It was just great hanging out up there and being done and just being done. It was great.
So go ahead and describe your bike. Jeff's got a question for it. Tell us about your bike and your rig,
Yeah.
the stuff that you brought with you.
So I run. It was a 2021 new for going into this year. I got it October of 20. It was October of 2021. 20. I got it. It's a 350 XCFW. I run the left-hand rear brake. I run the Recluse. I had a Voyager Trailtech Pro on it with a Garmin 64 as my backup on it. My light was just a little S1 that I spoke to Chris at Motor Minded, and he said, this will be perfect, everything you'll need. In hindsight, I'd probably run 2 lights with the chainsaw just to give me backup because they're up on the brush guards, and they're just more exposed. And I also, as the 350, I did do the ECU upgrades. For those who know Taco Moto, he helped me out a lot with what to put on the bike for trail riding. Just stock exhaust with the ultra silent it's a great tour bike. It's really good for transfers, and it's still great for technical riding. I think the 350 for me, it's perfect for the tour.
I think that you are in good company there. I think sort of the general wisdom of the group is that the 350 is the ideal tour bike. And if I ever decide to strap on my 6 shooters again and do it, that's the bike I would buy. Except I think I'd try to find an older one, a carbureted version that didn't have too many miles on it, and do it on that. I'm not for tour type riding. Another thing I'm not keen about, although you really don't have very many options anymore, are fuel injected bikes. All my street bikes are fuel injected, but all my dirt bikes are still carbureted. I
Right.
got one of the very last 2017 300 XCWs that was carbureted, and I just put the Electron modification on it, and it works great.
Yeah, because the tour is again, it's just something that I don't think you can understand. It's got a lot of transfer, right? It's got a lot of long days, and a lot of those transfer sections are legit double track, like you're riding. But then it's also got nasty narrow single track Idaho Skinny. For those who ride Idaho, you'll know what Idaho Skinny is, and the tour has enough in that you can't be on big bikes. You've got to balance fuel range, transfer range, technical riding. It's a ride like nothing else you will ever do, and getting the right bike. The 500's obviously really good at it. People have been successful on it, but I think that for me, the 350 was always the choice.
Yeah, 20 pounds is a lot. Every time I talk to Jimmy about it, Jimmy, of course, is a big advocate for the 500. He thinks it's the best dirt bike ever made. Uh, but and so when you look at the specs, it's like, yeah, it's only 20 pounds, and it does this better, that better. It's not as much on and off switch when you yank the throttle and stuff. But 20 pounds is a lot. Look, the saw that you and I had a long discussion about doesn't weigh 20 pounds. It weighs 9.2, nine point
Yeah.
three, or something like that. It's so when you add 20 pounds to a motorcycle that you don't have to, I think that's a lot of weight. And I'm the kind of guy, again, this comes out of climbing. There's some weight that carries itself. I go back to the days when people were arguing about rucksacks versus backpacks with frames in them. And the backpack with the frame, even if it does weigh more, is way better because it carries that weight more efficiently. It distributes the weight better, so your overall fatigue is less. But I'm the kind of guy that used to drill holes in pitons and stuff like that to make them lighter. And I do that for some of my tour stuff as well. I drill holes in levers for my handlebars and stuff like that.
Yep.
So 20 pounds to me is a lot. So when somebody says, well, it's just 20 pounds more, just is the non sequitur in that thought to me. 20 pounds to me seems like a lot.
And 20 pounds of constant motion for 14 hours a day for 10 days in a row, that wears on your body. All those fine tuning adjustments we do, like over a rock, didn't quite get it right, have to quickly adjust. That all adds up and wears you down. The days are just long and wearing. You really got to look after yourself. You got to have a good plan around how are you going to make sure how you're going to sleep and eat and all that sort of stuff. Like my worst day for mistakes was day 5 because I got chatting to my wife the night before, had stoked that I got through day 4, which was one of my big mental cruxes, and didn't get to sleep early that night. I was getting to sleep by 8:30 most nights. So that night I got to sleep closer to 11. And that next day, the fatigue, I made mental mistakes. I made a couple of mistakes along the way. You've really got to think about all of that. Like you say, it's an adventure with the bike as the vehicle, but the adventure part of it, you've got to have everything else in your mind. How are you going to do it? I was starting 4:30, quarter to 5 every day, had an hour and a half in the dark, but I'd rather be riding in the dark in the morning when I'm fresh and awake than at night dealing with it at 11 because I rolled out of town at 7:30 after coffee.
All right. So we're coming up on the end of the hour here. Let's wrap it up. Anything else you want to tell anybody? And anybody that's got any other questions for Sean, now's a good time to ask. But I'm just going to let you have the floor here and take us out.
Yeah, just while the question's up again, like really thanks Martin for everything you do to put into this. There's a lot of prep, and for as everybody goes through the prep, you get a taste of what Martin must be doing because we do it for ourselves, preparing the day, preparing our logistics, but he puts it together for the whole thing. And then just the communities you meet along the way, like Kalen's place, North Fork, Josh at Salmon, just everywhere along the way, the communities are just awesome. Like this was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I've done a fair bit in my life as well. I've spent 40 nights of my life on the side of El Cap, but this was probably the most rewarding adventure I've ever done. There's nothing like it. It was hard work. It was hard work prepping, but now it was definitely type 2 fun. It was great.
All right. Hardest route on El Cap.
I did Zenyatta Mandata, A5.
Woohoo! There you go.
And
That's
those
a big boy route.
Yeah. That was the biggest one for me. That was the toughest one.
Yeah. Don Wall here. Don Wall is for real. I
Yep.
didn't make it to the top, but there's some stuff on the first few pitches of Don Wall that you will not be able to pull a pin out of your ass with a tractor after you nail up some of that
That
stuff.
that side of the face, that stuff
Yeah,
is the serious stuff.
that stuff. That there's some hardcore stuff there.
Yeah,
50 feet out on RERPs and bashies will absolutely tune your ass straight up.
that's what Zenyatta was.
Yeah, there's some legit A5 on Zenyatta Mandata, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, there is scary
Yeah,
expando stuff.
yeah. All right, man.
All right,
Thanks a
thanks
lot for
again.
joining us for an hour. Thanks for coming through last year. I look forward to seeing you next summer. Take good care of yourself, okay?
Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye. All right. So, once again, you've wasted a perfectly good hour here on PBR Monday Hot Stove League. Got another one next week. Got some more guests next week. I'll get that announcement up in a few days. Then I'm going to try to have one more after that so we make sure that we get everybody in this year. Once again, I apologize profusely. Those poor guys who were out there towards the end had to feel like they were getting no love because I was gone, and it's the way it works. That's the way it'll be next year too. If you show up after September 1st, you just don't get as much attention if you're there at the meaty part of the season. So for you all that are again interested in 2022, I encourage you to get signed up ASAP. Those of you that are interested in calendars, I check that every few days, and I see that we've got, I think, maybe a dozen people that want calendars now. Make sure you get all that stuff into me by, I think I said 11/7 is the last day. So if you want a calendar, do that. And if you're going to ride in 2022, make sure you get registered ASAP because this year we're placing some restrictions on it. All right, everybody. I will see you next Monday night, same time. Thanks to our guests again, Sean Smith, and be seeing you.